Catholic school and church. I was lucky that the nun teaching first grade was bilingual, and so I learned English from her and the kids on the playground. The public school was just a couple blocks further than the Catholic school, and some Catholic students would taunt the public school kids on their way to school by calling them the devil's children. I was 6 years old then and thought that these kids were not really nice and wondered how they could act that way when they attended a school that taught religion. Later that first year, my dad had a falling out with the Catholic Church and enrolled us in the public school. For the next 2 years, my brother and I took the scenic route to school to avoid the slurs from the Catholic kids. My dad mandated that from now on, we would go to a church that was within walking distance and not Catholic. So we became Methodists. I enjoyed being released by the public school every Tuesday afternoon to attend religious education at the Methodist Church. This education consisted of a lot of coloring books and Bible stories. When my dad was laid off at the textile factory, we moved to Washington, D.C., and following my dad's mandate that we only go to a non-Catholic church within walking distance, we were at times Lutheran, Baptist, and finally Presbyterian from my 4th grade through the 9th grade. After that, we really didn't attend church much, mainly because my dad was too tired from working 2 jobs. In high school, my group of friends consisted mainly of Jewish kids and one non-Jewish one. They were the only kids who accepted me. I still correspond with one of them. She currently lives in Israel. The non-Jewish kid was Jane, a kind and generous person. I was curious about her background and asked her what church she attended. She said that she went to the All Souls Unitarian Church in town. I had never heard of it, but figured it was a good church since Jane went there. I didn't try going to it since it wasn't in walking distance. And so I filed the information in the back of my mind for later reference. My college years were devoid of any religious attendance, although being in southwestern Virginia, there were several churches within walking distance. My freshman year, I joined a Bible study group to learn more about the biblical people and their stories. However, when the moderator said that you can only get into heaven if you believed in Jesus as the Son of God, I had to speak up. I couldn't understand why a person who never heard of Jesus and who never killed anyone, never lied, never treated anyone unkindly, how this person could not be accepted into heaven. This was not the religion for me. So I left the Bible study group and became rather disillusioned with religion. After college, I met my husband, who turned out to be a devout Catholic. We were married in church and I attended Mass regularly, but I found myself not reciting the creeds since I didn't really believe what they said. 20 years later, during my divorce, my very best friend died of a heart attack, and I lost all my faith. I stopped going to church and spiritually felt lost. 14 years later, I had an empty nest and moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, where one can walk to the library, restaurants, and yes, various churches. One evening in 2008, the Obama election year, I joined several neighbors and friends on our rooftop deck, and we discussed the election. It turned out I was the only one planning to vote one way. A neighbor I thought was a close friend verbally attacked me on my voting choice. I left the gathering feeling lost and alone. My dad had passed 30 years before, but I followed his mandate. The next morning, I walked a couple blocks to a cute little church I had noticed in my drive through town. I figured it wasn't Catholic because it had no cross on the steeple. A man was outside passing out programs. He welcomed me and asked my name. It turned out he was the minister. In the cute church, It was the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Fredericksburg. I don't remember the service, but I do remember I felt at peace walking home. I went back the following Sunday, and the Reverend was again passing out the order of service, and he remembered my name. I sat in the back to observe how the people treated each other. I remembered my high school friend Jane and understood why she was a kind and generous person. So I attended a class on the UU principles and signed the membership book that November. I found where I belonged, and my soul was finally at peace. We ended up selling the little church and building a bigger one across the river, a 10-minute drive. I attended church there for 8 years before deciding to move to Michigan to be near my family. The first thing I did when I knew I was moving was to go online and search where the nearest UU congregation was to my new home. It wasn't in walking distance. Beacon was a 30 to 40-minute drive, but that didn't bother me as I had finally found where I belonged. Without my dad's mandate, I might have never walked to the little church on Caroline Street, learning the 7 principles and ending up at Beacon. By the way, I recently moved, and I'm now only 17 minutes away. Some of you have asked me what my car's license plate means. First, it's my maiden name, but it's also a Polish word meaning a convert. I converted from being a Catholic to going to different Protestant churches, being a Catholic again, and finally finding a home in 2 Unitarian Universalist congregations where all are accepted and welcomed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, both of you. Those were wonderful stories. I'm sure we'll be having more questions for you down in the social hall. Would you please rise in body or spirit for the closing hymn? It's number 1.